I'm Stephen Brown. I am the Associate Director of the Center for Ethics and Human Values. We do lots of great things on campus, trying to do more. Mostly, you might have encountered some events that are part of our Compass program, which is Conversations on Morality, Politics, and Society. This is kind of associated with that. This year, we're focusing on inequality. Um, but we're not actually the ones directly running this today. That's going to be our friend Gleb Tversky, who works here at Ohio State, but also is works at a couple of different nonprofit organizations. I'm going to let him explain all of that in just a moment. Those of you who are here because of the first year success series, you have to sign in order to get credit for that. I'm going to do that at the end, so you have to stay. But then there's also cookies, so you know, pros and cons. The person to talk to at the end is this lovely human being, Remy. She has the data to get you all signed up for that. So just bring your little Buck ID or your regular Buck ID, and she will get you signed in. I think that's all I have to say, so let's hand over to Gleb.
No problem. Thank you for that introduction, Stephen. I really appreciate you having me here. And I want to, first of all, start by congratulating all of you for being here. Just by being here, you are saving lives. Just by being here today, right now, and voting for one of these charities, at the end of the discussion, you are guaranteeing that $10 will go to a charity that everyone will vote for. So there'll be one winner charity, and that will save lives for that donation. So congratulations, you're all awesome. You can be out there, walking in the streets and partying and whatnot, but instead you're making the choice to save lives. Let's get started. Let's talk about how you actually save lives, what that means, and the ethics, morality of this question. We're talking about morality, politics, and society here. So this will be focused more on morality and society and a little bit on politics. So, as was mentioned, I work here in the history department. I specialize in behavioral sciences, so the history of behavioral sciences at the intersection of psychology, cognitive neuroscience, and behavioral economics. Now, I also work as a volunteer, so volunteer president of Intentional Insights, which is a nonprofit devoted to popularizing research in these fields to a broad audience, and focusing on effective decision-making, goal achievement, emotional and social intelligence, meaning and purpose, and altruism. And altruism is going to be the topic that we talk about. I also do writing, speaking, consulting, and coaching. So I do a bunch of things. So unlike many professors, I act in a variety of fields and try to intersect with a variety of people. And this is how this program came about. There's a nonprofit organization called The Life You Can Save, which we'll talk more about in the presentation, which provided a grant to Intentional Insights to hold these talks where every participant who comes and votes on a charity actually gets to donate from The Life You Can Save. There is a $10 donation to whichever charity gets voted on. So you actually make a real difference by coming here and making this decision, having this discussion. So let's see what we'll do today. We'll have a two-part presentation. So first we'll talk about the concept of effective giving. Not simply giving, not simply donations, but effectiveness. How can you make the most effective donation to achieve your goals, whatever they happen to be? And I'll be focusing on saving lives as what is often seen as the utmost goal, but you need to match your own values. So we'll be talking about that as well. So for effective giving, part one, then we'll have a Q&A about effective giving, what that means, the concept. Then we'll go into the second part of the activity, which is going to be the actual giving game, where we talk about 4 charities: Against Malaria Foundation, Soil, Haiti, Pratham's Breed India program, and GiveDirectly, which works in Kenya and Uganda. And you all will make a choice. Which charity gets $10 per person? I think there are something like 40 people here, something like that maybe. That's $400 to a charity, one of these charities, that will be dependent on your vote. And so you will save lives for making that donation concretely. Now, let's talk about morality. What is doing good? So we can talk about doing good as decreasing global suffering and increasing global flourishing. And that involves a number of things. So that involves making people happier, that involves making people healthier, dealing with diseases, dealing with various forms of poverty, increasing well-being, all sorts of things, physical well-being, mental well-being, that addresses flourishing. Now, different people focus on different aspects of what they care about. Some people care most about decreasing suffering. So they would focus on their donations on things like diseases and poverty. Some people focus on increasing well-being, and they would focus on things like supporting people having happier lives through some measures. So it depends on what you want to focus on. Most people focus more on relieving suffering, decreasing global suffering, than increasing flourishing, because they don't like people suffering. And suffering feels viscerally more bad than increasing flourishing. So if you have a choice, do you want to make one person happy, or do you want to stop one person being miserable? Most people make the choice to stop one person being miserable. That's like, in a nutshell, version of that. Let's talk about the power of stories and how stories move us. So, this is Albay. He was diagnosed with a life-threatening medical condition, and he had a wish to be a treasure pirate hunter. He's a child. He has a terminal illness. It's a great story. There's strong wish fulfillment elements there. It's a powerful story. And Albay was provided his wish by Make-A-Wish Foundation. Who here heard of Make-A-Wish Foundation? Almost everyone, wonderful. This is how powerful stories are. They get into you. Make-A-Wish Foundation has great stories about people like Albay, with whom it really does a nice thing by granting a wish for him to have this glorious day of being a pirate treasure hunter. So this more falls into the making someone happy category. And this costs about $10,000. Make-A-Wish Foundation spends just over $10,000, according to 2015 figures, on an average wish. Make someone Disney princess for a day, pirate hunter, fighter pilot. Now, we can think about other organizations. So there is Against Malaria Foundation. It saves a life, a child's life, for just under $3,000. So that's what Against Malaria Foundation does, saves lives for under $3,000 by handing out mosquito nets, and thorough research has shown that by handing out $3,000 worth of mosquito nets, it saves a life. So for the same amount of money that you can make one child happy for a day, you can make 3 children alive for the rest of their lives. Now think about how many wishes that grants, how many happy days those 3 children will have for Against Malaria Foundation. There's no grand story here. There's no powerful wish fulfillment. How many of you heard of Against Malaria Foundation? Much fewer hands up, something like 7 people. Consider another organization, GiveDirectly. GiveDirectly transfers cash directly, just cash transfers, to families in poor conditions living in Kenya and Uganda. These families live on about 65 cents a day. $1,000 transferred lifts a whole family out of poverty. A whole family, many kids, out of poverty. $50,000 lifts a whole village out of poverty, a whole poor village in Kenya and Uganda out of poverty. So for the same amount of money that Make-A-Wish Foundation gives one kid one happy day, for $10,000, if you estimate, let's say, around 3-4 children per family, that's something like 30,000 to 40,000 kids who are lifted out of poverty. How many happy days do they have because they're lifted out of poverty? How grand of a wish fulfillment is that? But there's no story. There's no Albay the pirate treasure hunter. So what's up? How many of you heard of GiveDirectly? Even less than Against Malaria Foundation. Well, why is that? Well, most people fall for stories. Stories are really powerful. They move us. We care about Albay the treasure hunter in a way that we don't care about some child who is saved from malaria or lifted out of poverty. There's a grand story there. We can empathize with Albay. It's called the narrative fallacy. Our brain is set up in such a way as to listen to stories and to care about stories and not care about data, not care about the 30 to 40 children who will be lifted out of poverty by $10,000, not care about the 3 children whose lives will be saved by $10,000, but to care about Albay the pirate hunter. So that's the narrative fallacy, falling for stories and thinking that stories represent data. Data is not stories. Stories are not data. They're anecdotes. And we shouldn't fall for anecdotes. So when you give because of a story, you're buying good feelings. It feels good to give to grant somebody's wish to be a pirate treasure hunter for a day. But how much good does it do in the world to give someone one day of happiness versus 3 children a lifetime, or 30 to 40 children lifting them out of poverty? How much good does it do in the world? How much does it increase global flourishing and decrease suffering? That's what you gotta ask yourself. So let's think about how we can buy impact. How we can make sure that our donations, what we do, is impactful and actually increases global flourishing and decreases suffering. We can use the scientific method to do so. Only 3% of the people who make donations research the effectiveness of charities and compare them before making a donation. That's ludicrous. 3% of people research charities and compare their effectiveness before making a donation, because the vast majority of the population donates because of stories. They hear a story, they think, okay, this is a good cause, and then they donate. Would you buy a car that way? You hear a story about a car and you donate that way? You know, just because of a commercial has a nice story, zoom zoom. Is that how you want to do charity? Is that how you want to do good in the world? But that's how most people do it. This is a fundamental failure mode of the human brain, of listening to stories and making decisions based on stories. So you can apply the scientific method to charity and quantify the impact. We can evaluate how much impact each individual dollar makes. And there's something called the QALY, which is the commonly used measure of impact for any charity, for any charitable action designed to address human suffering and increase flourishing. Quality adjusted life years, also known as nerding out and doing good. So quantifying the impact. So 1 QALY is 1 year in good health, and that considers both quantity and quality. So let's look at this example. Quality adjusted life years. If somebody has the one quality adjusted life year is 1 year at normal health. 0 is death. In between are things that incapacitate someone in some way or other. For example, losing sense of sight is generally considered to be half a QALY. So that's the kind of comparison. You know, if somebody can't walk, that would be a significant loss of QALY as well. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head. But that's how QALY is calculated. Quality adjusted life years. So that's only one of 2 components, the impact. Now, let's nerd out some more in doing good. Let's consider the costs. We have limited resources. The $10 that you will be donating for your vote, not out of your pocket, but on behalf of Life You Can Save, can only go to 1 charity. All of your donations can only go to 1 charity. Anytime you spend money on donations, anytime you spend money on anything, you can only spend it on that one thing. So, we're making a choice among a limited amount of stuff. And what you need to do is think about what is the cost effectiveness of each charity. So what do we do now? First, we shouldn't use overhead to evaluate charities. This is a common myth that focusing on administrative expenses of charities is a good measure of charities. Like comparing their program expenses to their fundraising and their marketing. Overhead, focusing on overhead is a myth. What we need to focus on instead of focusing on overhead is their impact per dollar, their cost effectiveness. So this is the crucial metrics. Cost effectiveness. You divide the qualities that an intervention makes. The quality adjusted life years that a charity helps, addresses, by the amount of cost per life year. So that is the fundamental metric of cost effectiveness by which we can judge charity. How much good does it do per dollar? Now you can do the same thing when you buy any sort of thing. When you buy a car, you want to know the amount of goodness and benefit you get from that car per dollar you spend. That's the intuitive arithmetic we all do in our heads, even though we may not realize that's what we do when we do car shopping, comparison shopping. Or when you go and buy lunch, you want to know the nutrients and the yumminess that you get for your money. This is the same thing, the impact, the benefit per dollar. Now, when I first found out about effective giving, I had a defensive response. My favorite charity at the time, which was my Unitarian Universalist church, I kind of thought that it was the best cause and that it optimized for saving lives. I thought that, well, if we create this community, it'll help people and that helps save lives. So this is a common response to people finding out about effective giving. Now, it would be so convenient if the thing we really, really care about already turns out to be optimized for saving lives. Ain't the case. It will be very convenient, but it's not really the case that the thing that we already right now care a lot about is absolutely the best thing for saving lives. We need to not lie to ourselves. There is a confirmation bias, one of the thinking errors that our brain tends to make, when we interpret new evidence as confirming old beliefs. So we fold new evidence. You found out about this concept of effective giving, and there's temptation. There's a part of you which says that, oh, I have a favorite charity, X, I don't know, whatever charity you care about. And there's temptation to say that, I can somehow twist that charity into being really effective for saving lives. No. Just no. Don't do it. Don't deceive yourself. Be honest with yourself. So what you want to do is you want to match your values without fooling yourself, without deceiving yourself. If you want to save lives, that's a value, but it doesn't have to be your value. You don't have to care about saving lives as your utmost cause. There are three broad categories of beneficiaries that are commonly seen as important in the charitable sector, what you can give for. So current people, current animals, and future humans and animals. Each category can be subdivided. So let's take an example of people. Your people, the ones that you identify with, your tribe, or all people is something you have to ask for. So, for example, geography. Do you care about people in Columbus most, or people all over the world? Now, you can care about people in Columbus more than people all over the world, but then don't fool yourself into saying that you care about saving lives, because that's not the same thing. You need to be honest with yourself and say, I care about saving lives in Columbus more than I care about saving lives elsewhere. And that's fine if that's what you value. You need to be honest with yourself. Same thing goes for race, ethnicity, gender, sex, socioeconomic status. Let's dig deeper. So, your money goes about 7 times further in Africa than the United States. So you can make about 7 times the impact in Africa as the United States for the same amount of money. That means that you can save 7 times as many lives in Africa as in the United States per dollar. So for example, I mentioned already, GiveDirectly allows you to give money to poor Africans directly via cell phones. So do you value Africans? If you compare giving money directly to someone on the street here homeless person or someone in Africa through GiveDirectly. By giving money to someone on the street versus giving money for GiveDirectly, you show through your actions that you value people here about 7 times as much as you value in Africa. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you should be honest with yourself about your values that motivate you to do so. So we're here to talk about morality. And this is about your morals. You need to be honest with yourself about your morals and what you care about when you make these choices. This is the fundamental thing, that you need to be honest with yourself. So let's check out this video, which I hope will play.
Emotional pictures and stories pull us to donate. But do these emotional
Maybe it'll play now.
Emotional pictures and stories pull us to donate. But do these emotional depictions tell us anything about how well our money is used? Some nonprofits are hundreds of times more effective at improving the world. So how can your donation do the most good? Fortunately, some organizations help you be a truly effective and savvy donor. GiveWell provides in-depth research reports on global poverty organizations. The Life You Can Save evaluates global poverty organizations and offers an impact calculator that shows exactly how much good you can do with your donation. Animal Charity Evaluators evaluates and advocates for the best animal charities. Giving What We Can unites a community of people who give 10% or more of their income to effective charities. And Intentional Insights offers engaging articles and videos with practical suggestions about effective giving. So next time you think about donating, make sure you donate effectively. By being a savvy donor, you can do the most good with your money. And please, spread the word by sharing this video.
The video is a little bit behind, so I'll just go on. So, there are several organizations that act as consumer watchdog organizations for charities that help you make the most effective decision for how you can spend your money. You don't want to spend all your time in the nonprofit sector of your brain when you think about donations, figuring out which charity does the most. So you want to actually look at consumer charity reports for charity. And here are the charity evaluators that are the highest quality charity evaluators that actually evaluate the effectiveness of charities. There are other ones around, like Charity Navigator and so on, but those don't evaluate the effectiveness of charities. They evaluate how much money a charity spends and so on, but that is not a real unit of effectiveness. The only thing that we should care about is effectiveness. So GiveWell provides in-depth reports and rankings on global poverty organizations. The Life You Can Save does the same rankings and also provides an impact calculator that you can use to see the impact that your charitable dollars make. Animal Charity Evaluators focuses on animal charities, provides in-depth reports, ranking, and advocacy for various animal charities. There are a couple of organizations that address future risk. There's the Future of Humanities Institute and the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. So if those are existential risk causes that you care about, those are good organizations. Spreading effective giving messages. There's Giving What We Can, which is a community of people devoted to giving about 10% or more of their money to effective charities. There's 80,000 Hours, which recommends high-impact careers. For many of you, as you're choosing your careers right now, that might be a good site to visit, so 80,000 Hours. And of course, Intentional Insights, which I help lead, spreads effective giving ideas to a broad audience. Effective altruism, more broadly, is a movement devoted to applying the scientific method to charity. Now, this gives us the promise of a better tomorrow. Applying the scientific method to charity, we can make an actual effective impact on doing good in the world, and we can know the actual data, the quantified data on how much good we do through our donations. So now that you know, what will you do? One great approach is to spread effective giving ideas. Remember, convincing one other person to give effectively, their salary, their time, is just as good as doing it yourself. The more people you can convince to give effectively, the better off the world will be, the more lives will be saved, the more whatever value you care about, your values, will be achieved. So this is the end of the first part of the presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'll take questions right now before we move on to the second part, which is the giving game part.
Where do you feel the balance between your values and the impact and effectiveness of organizations should be struck so that there's impact in things you care about, but also there's effectiveness in that impact?
So when you should figure out your values, whatever you care about, whether it's saving lives in Columbus, saving lives in Africa, saving animals, and then look at the most effective charities within that field. Look at their effectiveness and compare their effectiveness. If you have more complex values than only one value, you should look at a number of charities. Let's say if you care about saving lives, to extent, let's 30% of your values are about saving lives. You should make 30% of your donations optimized for saving lives. And if you care 20% for education, then you should optimize 20% for education, the most effective charities in education. So I would suggest having that process, looking at your values, and then within your values, choosing the most effective charities.
Is there some form of nonprofit index that you use to figure out what charity that you will, look into?
So I mentioned that the current high-quality charity evaluators are the Life You Can Save, GiveWell, and Animal Charity Evaluators. These are the high-quality consumer report organizations for charities, essentially, which you can use to guide your giving. Now, those don't evaluate the whole range of charities out there, of course. They're for certain charities. And so it's going to be harder when you go to other organizations. We'll get to that in the second part of our presentation when we talk about charities that have not been evaluated by GiveWell and the Life You Can Save or Animal Charity Evaluators.
So I guess what I was wondering is, it seems like some of these charities it's hard to compare them in certain ways. So for instance, fighting malaria and saving a life is one kind of thing you could do, but giving to an educational foundation that's making a difference in some part of the world is a really different kind of thing you can do, and one has a much more immediate impact than the other, but they both seem really valuable, and I'm a little worried that if we, depending on how the calculation goes, that what we're supposed to do is just only give to the sort of immediate saving lives impact, and that would mean not giving, say, to long-term education projects, which also seem very important and valuable. So that's my question.
Yeah, my answer is it's hard. Most people, 97% of people out there don't compare charities. They don't think like that. They don't think I should either give to education or I should give to, saving lives. They hear a story about Albay the treasure hunter, or about a child in Africa who needs to have an education, and they give for that reason. They don't think about their values, they don't compare their values, they don't compare the effectiveness of charities. So that's not a question that the vast majority of the population asks. Now, as we're here and considering this question, it's a very important question to ask, and that goes again to our values. What do we value? What do we care about? We can calculate the impact in terms of life saved. We can't calculate the impact in terms of education for the vast majority of nonprofits. Unfortunately, there are very few nonprofits that actually do randomized control trials on their impact, and randomized control trials are the gold standard of calculating the impact. So very few nonprofits do that, and that's very unfortunate. If more did that, then we can actually say, oh, you have educated this child from, getting 50 on their exams to 75 on their exams, and that can give us some actual information on their impact. But the vast majority of educational nonprofits don't do that. They just share stories. So that's very unfortunate. And one of the goals of effective giving is to encourage nonprofits to actually do trials, randomized control trials, and share their actual impact. Because if we don't see their impact, well, why should we give to them just because of a story? What does a story actually tell us about how cost-effective they are? So I would say that we should definitely look at our values and what we value. Do we value saving lives? Do we value education? And so that gets to the question of what do we compare for? And then we should see which charity within that sector has the data to back up its claims. You know, just like we wouldn't buy a car if we didn't have the data on how good it is, we shouldn't buy a charity if we don't have data about how good it is.
So earlier you were talking about that that unit that we kind of used to.
Quality.
Yeah, that was it.
Quality adjusted life year.
Right. So that seems to take a bunch of data from all different kinds of things, like we were talking about, that address different kinds of poverty or saving lives in different ways. That could have the different kinds of effects we were talking about, like long-term or short-term. And so does it make sense then, because those different kinds of things we save all affect the world in very different ways, does it make sense to wrap them up into one unit like that? And is that an efficient unit to use to measure these kinds of things?
Excellent question. So the quality is a unit of life saved. So it's unit for only the value that we care about, that people care about who want to save lives. So to the extent that you care about saving lives, that's an effective unit. To the extent that you care about education, that's not an effective unit. To the extent that you care about preserving the environment, that's not an effective unit. So quality, the only salience of that is for saving lives, which for most people is the point of charitable giving. And that's why organizations like The Life You Can Save, GiveWell, Animal Charity Evaluators use this unit as their fundamental metric of effectiveness, cost effectiveness. And we, unfortunately, it would be lovely if we had a lot of other units and a lot of other organizations, and I could give you a presentation 10 years about other units and their impact, but we don't. That's a great question. That's an issue that's being talked about within the effective altruism.
I want to follow up on the question that came up earlier about education and things like that. So, I mean, I understand the response that it's difficult to measure education. It seems like it's in principle difficult to measure education, not just it's not being done. But say, for instance, that we have some reason to believe that the reason that people are in need of the kind of emergency care, keeping you alive kind of care, is because they're part of a larger social structure that's unstable. And what we really need to do, you might think then, is fix the larger social structure that's unstable. Otherwise, we're always going to be trying to just fix the base level problems. So I guess I'm saying, you've been talking about how you kind of have to pick your values and go from there, but it seems like even if you just have the base value of, I want to keep people alive, the answer to that question might not be, I'm going to keep this person alive, but I'm going to invest in a whole range of things that lead to the stability of the society so that over time things actually change. And so I wonder about what the costs are of requiring high measurability in charity recommendation.
So excellent question. So every charity that is capable of doing so, I think, should run trials on its impact, and those trials can give information about the impact of the charity itself in its mission. And then we can use that data to measure against our own values. So we talked about, you gave the example of an education charity, right? So we can have an example, as an example, if there's an education charity that does education for poor children in Brazil, it can measure these poor children before their before the intervention of the charity, based on a number of life indicators, and then can measure them, keep measuring them as the intervention of the charity impacts them and throughout the course of their lives. So not their whole lives, but the impact of the charity. So that will give us data on things like long-term impact of the charity's intervention. So it's viable to get that data. Unfortunately, charities don't do it. This is viable to do with education charities, with business charities, with entrepreneurship charities, with all sorts of charities. You know, I don't know if you heard of Heifer International, which gives animals to poor people. You can do, Heifer can do a test, can test the impact of its giving and evaluate how much good, how much of an increased economic productivity the animal that it gave to a family does. But it doesn't currently do that. Make-A-Wish Foundation can also see, how much good it did through granting that wish. It currently doesn't. So this is doable. It's costly, as he said. But I think we as donors should demand this data. Otherwise, how can we know? Otherwise, this is just stories, and charities compete currently based on stories. Who can tell the best story? Telling the best story is not at all an indicator of whether it's a good charity, as you can see by the example of Make-A-Wish Foundation versus Against Malaria Foundation. Make-A-Wish Foundation definitely wins out on stories. Doesn't mean it deserves the money.
You say that like a foundation like Make-A-Wish Foundation should do trials to see how they effective. So how would you do it? Like how would you measure the good that it produces?
Sure. I'd measure the amount of well-being, happiness that the child had and the child's family had, presumably impact the child's family, before the Make-A-Wish Foundation intervention, and then the amount of happiness and well-being that the child has after the Make-A-Wish Foundation, at the range of, let's say every month, and see how long the happiness lasts, and so on. So then you can see the boost, because this is the point of Make-A-Wish Foundation, boosting happiness, right? So you can see how much the boost in happiness lasts, and how much impact it actually has for the child and the child. Yeah, so you want to have an average, you want measured for each child that Make-A-Wish Foundation has an intervention, and then you average out the happiness boost, which is the same thing for any other charity that you want to average out. You want to look at all the children that it does this for, so sample surveys, and then have them run over time, average them out, and give us the data as consumers of the charity. Because that's what we are. We are consumers of the charity to which we donate, and we should demand this data. Otherwise, we should buy.
For determining like how impactful a charity is, besides happiness and lives saved, are there other factors that influence the impactfulness?
Absolutely. Whatever value you care about. So, for example, let's say you talk about an environmental charity that buys rainforest land and saves it from being destroyed. Then you look at how successful is it in buying rainforest land per dollar donated to it. So that would include things like how savvy is it in negotiating with people, and how good, how entrepreneurial is it in getting in-kind donations. You don't want a charity that gets gouged by wealthy landowners saying, oh, pay me $1 million for this acre of land. You want a charity that has savvy negotiators that can go and say, hey, let me buy this acre of land for $1,000 and have various negotiations that result in it. But like I said, currently, those two charities can go and tell you the same things. They can go and say, hey, there's this parrot named Andy who was saved in my acre of land forest that I bought, that my charity bought. Don't you want to save Andy and give me more money? And both of these charities can say the same thing. But you don't know about how much land they bought, actually, which is what you should actually care about if you donate to that charity. So whatever mission the charity has, you can look at the mission and you can look at the impact. For example, let me go to my own charity, Intentional Insights. Our goal is to reach a broad audience with our content. So we have presentations, we have articles. I just did an interview with a conservative this morning with a conservative talk show host in Cincinnati about the Trump-Clinton debate. So like reaching that sort of audience with rational thinking strategies. That's the goal of the organization. So effective thinking strategies. We can talk about how many people we reached or the amount of money that was donated to the organization. And that would be the measure of reach and impact, so cost effectiveness. So any sort of organization should be able to give you this data easily. Otherwise, they're not a worthwhile cause to donate to because you don't know how well they spend their money. And you should be worried about that because many charities don't spend their money well. All right. If there are no more questions, we'll go on to the second part. I'll count off to 1 from 3 for the final questions. 3, 2, 1. All right. So let's go into the giving game. We'll have 4 charities to compare: Against Malaria Foundation, Soil, Pratham's Read India program, and GiveDirectly. Let's talk about each in turn. Against Malaria Foundation is top rated by the Life You Can Save and GiveWell. Its goal is to protect people from deadly malaria carrying mosquitoes by distributing mosquito nets. Rigorous research by GiveWell and the Life You Can Save shows that it saves 1 life for just under $3,000. I think something like $2,800, $2,900 saves a life in terms of qualities. So if you value saving lives, this is your primary value. This is the best choice by far of all the 4 charities that we talk about. Soil, Haiti. It transforms wastes into organic compost in Haiti through the use of various forms of ecologically safe sanitation. It rehabilitates soil through creating this compost and creates business opportunities for local business or local people who work in soil Haiti. Research shows, so it does have some research, that it reduces unmanaged human waste by 3.5 times where implemented. So that's the kind of outcome we can see. So we're asking, there was a question about outcome. So we can see that for its implementation, where it's implemented, it reduces human waste by 3.5 times. It's not top rated by GiveWell or the Life You Can Save, so it's a good choice if you care more about the environment than if you care about saving lives. So don't fool yourself into thinking that it saves lives. That's not that's not the choice for this charity. It's about saving the environment. Pratham's Read India program. It develops low-cost solutions to improve the quality of learning in India. So there are lots of people in India who are illiterate and focuses on school-level elementary learning to help children learn. It works with governments to take them to scale, so it has a lot of collaborative arrangements. It helped improve the education of 5.7 million children in 2015. So it's not top rated by GiveWell or the Life You Can Save. It's not its mission to save lives, basically. So if you care about education more than you care about saving lives, that's a good choice. And GiveDirectly. So it's top rated by the Life You Can Save and GiveWell. It transfers cash directly to poor families using cell phones, to families living in less than $5, 6.65 cents a day. It transforms the fate of a single family for a $1,000 cash transfer and the whole village through, that should be a $50,000, so not $15,000, $50,000. It saves a life for about $15,000, so it's less optimized for saving lives than Against Malaria Foundation. So this would be a better choice than Against Malaria Foundation if you care not only about saving lives, but also about empowerment and autonomy of the beneficiaries. So Against Malaria Foundation doesn't give beneficiaries autonomy and empowerment. It tells them, like, hey, you get the malaria nets. Your lives are going to be saved this way. GiveDirectly gives them people money directly and says, hey, you do whatever you want with it. And this is how it saves lives. So this is the difference. So, questions about these 4 charities?
So I have one to start out with. I don't know why it would be fooling ourselves to think that sanitation improvement is saving lives.
Sure. So sanitation improvement in the moment, directly doesn't save lives. It has long-term impact, which would, of course, lead to a positive impact in life-saving, but it doesn't save lives in the moment.
Yeah, it's not to, okay.
Right. So if we want to
Medium-term impact.
sure, medium
Sanitation improvements work pretty quickly.
Sure, yes. Medium-term impact, yes, I agree. So medium-term, it doesn't save lives in the moment. Like, this is not its goal, and it doesn't claim, Soil Haiti doesn't claim that it saves lives. It's not the mission of Soil Haiti to save lives. So that's not what we should orient toward if we want to save lives. That's not the value. This is a value if we care about the environment.
So a concern I see brought up a lot with things like GiveDirectly, where they focus on just giving resources directly to the places that lack resources, is that it takes it hurts the autonomy of those places by having them, in some cases, start to rely on the kinds of forces that just inject resources into the places, and that although it does help them in the moment, I have concerns at least that maybe it wouldn't help them in the long term really build up their economies or their villages in this case, and that is kind of like a short-term solution that burns out pretty quickly. Is GiveDirectly like that? Is just on that, I guess.
Sure, wonderful question. So GiveDirectly does two types of things. It does direct cash transfers of $1,000. It goes, basically, here's the model of GiveDirectly. It goes to a village, finds 4 villages in Kenya and Uganda. It goes door to door, it selects a number of families, about 50 to 75 per village, and transfers $1,000 to each family. Now, the vast majority of the work that GiveDirectly does, that's what it involves. So it doesn't have a sustainable thing. It doesn't keep sustaining that village. It just says, here's $1,000. Do it as you will. Research shows that those people spend it quite wisely. They spend it on rebuilding their homes, buying crops. There was one story where somebody used it to buy like guitars and so on, and started up a musical band and made a good business out of entertainment. So this is how it works, GiveDirectly. So it doesn't have a sustaining kind of interaction with those people. It just says, here you go. That's all. Improve your life. Now, that's one thing. The second thing that it does, that it started to do very recently, is launching what's called a basic income project. So basic income is giving people a sustainable income for a long but limited period of time. So it gives people in 4 countries, Kenya and Uganda, those it chooses, 10 years worth of basic income that allows them to survive and allows them to do things like get an education, build up a business, and so on. So those people know that that support is time limited for 10 years, but they know their life is protected and secure for those 10 years. And they can really invest into themselves and build themselves up in those 10 years. So basic income is something it's just starting to do right now. And this is a really interesting concept that we can delve more into in the Q&A, kind of what basic income would do. But there's a lot of kind of research on it, and I know there's at least one person in the room who knows more about it than I do. So we can talk more about that in the group. All right. So separate into groups of 3 or 4 people, and for the next 15 minutes, you'll be discussing the 4 charities and deciding which charity you think is best, thinking about these questions with people around you. Now, as you do so, questions might come up. So I will be walking around. You can flag me down. I'll also be eating cookies. This is a good opportunity for you to take cookies. Cookies help you think, I find. So this is a good chance to boost your brain power by taking some cookies. And if you don't know something and like it's a small data thing, just Google it. All of you have smartphones or some variation thereof. So just Google. Okay, so groups of 3 and 4, please break up and go get cookies and snacks and coffee and stuff like that.